A lens is basically a mechanism to make images of objects either on photographic film or on the media capable of storing an image chemically or electronically. A lens may be permanently fixed to a camera or it may be interchangeable. Different lenses have different focal lengths, apertures and other properties. There are various kinds of lenses which are available and they have been categorized into certain names. For example, we have normal lens, we have telephoto lens, wide angle lens, fisheye lens, zoom lens and perspective control lens. Now, all these lenses have different properties and different results. We will see them one by one. Let us begin with the most common, that is the normal lens. Normal lens in photography or in cinematography is a lens that reproduces perspective that looks exactly as it appears to the human eye. It is natural looking picture. Therefore, a normal lens, as the name suggests, gives us a normal look. A lens with focal length. Now, how do you define a normal lens? Normal lens is a lens with a focal length which is equal to the virtually equal to the diagonal of the negative that it produces. Now, different brands have different formats of within 35 millimeter camera also. So, therefore, we have found that anything between 45 millimeter to 55 millimeter, these lenses are called normal lenses for a 35 millimeter camera or a miniature camera. Normal lens has a great amount of latitude for aperture. It can be as much as from f1 to f32, which means there are a variety or there is a huge amount of openings available for shooting pictures. For low light, for example, we need lenses with a aperture which is as good as 2.8 or maybe even smaller or even larger, because photojournalists, for example, if they are shooting in the evening or under low light conditions, these lenses are very useful for them and they can take pictures even if the light is very low. Normal lenses are basically available with all the cameras because they are the prime lenses for all the cameras, and people who have to do some specialized work, they normally do away with this lens because this lens gives a normal look. This picture of a restaurant dining table was taken with a normal lens. As you can see that the whole table is in acceptable sharpness, but little beyond the flower there is a kind of unfocused area or say blurred area. It is because the depth of field was only limited to as much as the width of the or the diameter of the table. This is the picture of flowers taken with a macro lens at a very high aperture. You can see the entire details are clearly visible, and macro lens being a lens which allows you to go closer to the subject than a normal lens or tele lens or even a wide angle lens without distortion. A macro lens has the great advantage of giving you a complete sharp picture without going away from the subject, and going closer to the subject is what it allows you. A telephoto lens is a specific type of long focus lens in which the physical length of the lens is shorter than the focal length. This is achieved by incorporating a special lens group known as telephoto group. It extends the light path to create a long focus lens in a much shorter overall design. The angle of view and other effects of long focus lenses are the same for telephoto lenses of the same specified focal length. Long focal length lenses are often informally referred to as telephoto lenses. A telephoto lens is a lens whose focal length is greater than that of the normal lens. That is to say, it gives a perspective which is smaller than what a normal lens will give. A telephoto lens has great advantages, particularly when it comes to depth of field or it comes to doing portraiture. A telephoto lens can give you specific results. Sitting at a very far from the subject, you can take pictures at a very close range, simply because it magnifies or it reduces the distance between the camera and the subject. Telephoto lenses have, while they have the advantages of isolating the subject, the disadvantage is the shorter depth of field. The shorter depth of field can eliminate or sometimes even put out of focus subjects which are very close, or the objects which are very close to the subject. But nevertheless, telephoto lenses are excellent for portraiture. Particularly 105 millimeter lens is considered to be the best lens for portraiture. Sometimes telephoto lenses are broken into subtypes. For example, medium photo lens covering between 30 degrees to 10 degrees field of view, and the other is super telephoto lens covering between 8 degrees through less than 1 degree field of view. Now, all this is purely for categorization, but basically they all form part of telephoto lenses. This picture of the insect was taken with a telephoto lens. One can see the object, that is the insect, very clearly and in a larger size. At the same time, one can see that while the petals around the subject or the insect are in perfect sharpness, little beyond, that is, the petals are out of focus. That is to say, a telephoto lens has a shallower depth of field vis-a-vis a wide angle lens. This picture of a tableau was taken during Republic Day parade in New Delhi. In this picture, obviously it had to be taken with a telephoto lens. As one can see, the angle of view is also top view. Now, the real thing about this picture is that although it is a telephoto lens, the aperture was kept so small that the entire depth of field around the tableau is clearly visible, but if you go further into the crowd is out of focus. Let us now see wide angle lenses. Wide angle lenses are those lenses whose focal length is shorter than that of the normal lens. Now, a wide angle lens, as the name suggests, gives a wider view of the subject. It has its great advantages, it has also certain disadvantages. These lenses are also divided into super wide lenses, and later on a super wide lens becomes a fisheye lens. However, in the case of a wide angle lens, the point to note is that besides giving a wider view of the subject, it has advantages like greater depth of field. That is to say, even at the middle aperture, one can get a huge amount of depth of field, for example, for shooting landscapes or subjects which are dispersed within the vertical distance, and they can all be in focus. At the same time, they can be in the true perspective. However, the disadvantage with a wide angle lens is that if it is not held properly or used properly, it can change the perspective, it can create perspective distortion, which means, for example, if you are shooting Taj Mahal and if you are not holding the camera properly, chances are that the verticals or the pillars on the sides of this Taj Mahal will look as if they are falling into and collapsing. On the other hand, if you know how to handle a wide angle lens, the picture will be absolutely perfect, it will be straight. The only thing is that your camera should be parallel to the structure. The other advantages of wide angle lens are that it can be used even in a small space with a large number of people. I have myself shot as many as 10 people in a small area of about 8 to 9 feet, and there is no distortion at all, and the results are perfect. You cannot even make out, and all of them are in focus simply because of the depth of field. So, that is how a wide angle lens can be used. It is a very useful lens, and particularly 28 millimeter lens gives least amount of perspective distortion. However, while shooting with 24 millimeter lens or 20 millimeter lens or even less, you have to be careful because the perspective distortion becomes all the more prominent. In this picture of a woman weighing mangoes is a clear example of perspective distortion. Firstly, it is a wide angle lens. Secondly, he has taken at a very low viewpoint, thereby further distorting the perspective. This picture shows a proper use of a wide angle lens. Here it is a 28 millimeter lens used, and one can see that it covers a bigger area. The people, they look normal, they look straight, and not only that, the depth of field, which is so important when it comes to wide angle lenses, the Durga or the statue is also very clearly visible, and even beyond, the clouds and the sky have a great amount of sharpness and details. This picture of the rider early in the morning taken at Rajpath gives an impact or a feeling of a super wide lens, but one can see clearly there is no perspective distortion. Actually, it was taken with a 28 millimeter lens and was later cropped to a extreme composition. Next we have fisheye lens. This is a wide angle lens that takes in a broad panoramic and hemispherical image. Fisheye lenses quickly became popular in general photography for their unique distorted appearance. They are often used by photographers shooting broad landscapes to suggest the curve of the earth. Hemispherical photography is used for various scientific purposes to study plant canopy geometry and to calculate near ground solar radiation. The focal length of fisheye lenses depend on the film format. For the popular 35 mm film format, typical focal length of fisheye lenses are between 8 mm to 10 mm, while in the case of full frame image, it can be from 15 to 16 millimeter. All the ultra wide angle lenses suffer from some amount of barrel distortion. While this can easily be corrected for moderately wide angles of view, fisheye lenses sometimes give an appearance of a convex curvature. At the same time, there are some fisheye lenses where the barrel distortion is present. However, this can be corrected through certain modifications available to us. This is a fish eye picture, and one can see that the center objects are not only sharp and clear, but also are in proportion, while on the flanks, above and below the subject, there is a distortion. We will now have a look at zoom lenses. Zoom lenses, it is a mechanical assembly of lens for which focal length can be varied. They are also known as variable focal length lenses. That is to say, the focal length within the same lens can be varied even from a wide angle to a telephoto angle. Normally, these lenses are available, and the popular ones are like Nikon 18 millimeter to 200 millimeter, or for that matter 18 millimeter to 55 millimeter. Similarly, other brands also have lenses which go from wide angle to a telephoto lens. However, these lenses have a certain amount of disadvantage. For example, a zoom lens may not be giving a perfect picture and may cause vignetting when we are shooting at a very large. Another thing is with zoom lenses is that these are they get easily damaged. They are not very reliable as compared to the fixed focal length lenses. Another thing is that these zoom lenses, they are not quality wise as perfect as fixed focal lenses, but nevertheless they are in great demand and they are being used. The biggest advantage being that same place you can take a closer view, you can take a distant view of the same subject and create an environment. You would have heard terms like 4x, 3x, 5x. These kind of figures are available just to intimate to you that the magnification through this lens can be if it is 4x, it can be 4 times. That is to say, if a subject is say 16 meters away from you, you can bring it as close as 4 meters because it is 4x. This is a kind of indication for particularly for amateur photographers. These are normally found in the digital cameras which are of lower range. And the other thing about these lenses is that and these are clearly indicated in the digital cameras through W and T, which W means wide and T means tele. So, while shooting itself, you can easily move from wide angle to a telephoto angle, therefore making it easy for you to shoot pictures through zoom lenses. Now, we will talk about PC lenses or perspective control lenses. Now, these are generally used for architectural purposes, where the convergence of the building or the distortion of the buildings is avoided by moving the lens itself. Now, these lenses, they can create a shape of the original building without moving closer to it or away from it, and this is why they are called perspective control lenses. Perspective control lenses can be used to show the buildings vertically straight, but also they can be used in landscapes. They are also used in what you call close-up photography, whereby the subject appears to be as natural as it actually is. Since we cannot go very close to the subject because of perspective distortion, this kind of lenses are very helpful even in taking a proper natural picture of the subject. These are very expensive and are rarely used, but they are available in the market, and the best example of perspective control comes from the large format cameras, where the tilt and shift facility is available. Those are the real perspective controls, but here this is a kind of a choice for it's a poor man's choice, I would say, perspective control lens. At the same time, it is useful for taking pictures on a miniature format camera. While all these lenses are good, used by various through various brands and from various cameras and all. However, for the digital cameras, we have lenses which have a specific problem, which we will discuss now. For example, we have heard of DX. Now, DX format is a kind of format in which the picture size or the picture frame is smaller than that of the 35 millimeter camera. Now, as a result, there was an effort made, and people now have a format which is known as FX format, with this which matches with the 35 millimeter camera. The advantage of this FX format is that it gives the same frame and therefore the same kind of image as we get with the normal 35 millimeter camera. Since 35 millimeter camera seems to be the basis of all photography today, this lens, FX format cameras are considered to be better than the old DX formats. Of course, they are still in use, but over a period of time, people will like to switch over to the FX format cameras, so that 35 millimeter camera still maintained, and you get the pictures which are quite similar to what we were getting earlier on. To conclude, there are various kinds of lenses available to us for photography. They are the normal lenses, they are the telephoto lenses, the wide angle lenses, the zoom lenses, the fisheye lenses, and also the digital camera lenses. They all have their own advantages and disadvantages. Over a period of time, one would realize that normal lenses are the least used lenses because of the normal view that the eye sees. However, the other two lenses, that is mainly the telephoto lenses and the wide angle lenses, have a great use. Wide angle lenses are used basically in cramped areas, or in the case of say landscapes, or when we want more depth of field, while telephoto lenses give us shallow depth of field. They compress the view they can be used from a distance, and therefore, they can be useful for various kinds of pictures where perspective, where the sharpness is a kind of say the main consideration. In the same time, we have fisheye lenses which give a very distorted perspective, and they are used very rarely. At the same time, some people use them very creatively. As far as digital cameras are concerned, the FX is the best format available to us today, because it matches with the 35 millimeter camera, and it gives the same view as 35 millimeter camera. And they are becoming more and more popular. However, the lenses, fixed focus lenses, are easily the best and compared to the zoom lenses.